the classroom of the galaxy's elite. In the heart of the galactic education hub, the Academy of Strategic Command, the largest and most influential alien species in the known sectors gathered to train their brightest minds. The domed lecture hall shimmered with the soft, iridescent glow of subspace displays, showing moving holograms of star systems, battle zones, and fleet maneuvers. Every seat was filled, from seasoned cadets to representatives of apex predator civilizations, students who had survived wars, led fleets, or commanded planetary defenses. At the center of this assembly stood the instructor, a veteran of countless interstellar conflicts. His body shimmered with the bioluminescent markers of rank and experience, and his voice carried authority without aggression. Today, he began, we examine a subject rarely debated in active war councils. A subject that every strategist must understand to anticipate the unexpected. He paused, letting the anticipation build. Humanity. A murmur ran through the hall. Some alien students had encountered human delegations, but none had witnessed them in combat. Yet every student knew the law. Humanity had never officially participated in interstellar warfare, yet their reputation was troubling. A holographic projection materialized above the instructor's podium, showing the Sol system with a detailed map of known interstellar corridors, fleet deployments, and conflict zones. Humans, he said, are banned from direct engagement in galactic conflicts. That is not due to weakness, inexperience, or lack of resources. It is due to something far more consequential. The students leaned forward, intrigued. Apex predators, energy-based intelligences, and crystalline strategists alike exchanged glances. This was not a propaganda lesson, it was a study in pattern recognition, risk assessment, and strategy from outside the battlefield. Consider, the instructor continued, the human approach to conflict. Their fleets are smaller than many would expect for a civilization of their size, their technology is modular rather than monolithic, and their doctrine emphasizes adaptability over sheer firepower. In a direct battle, they are neither dominant nor invulnerable. Yet, their influence is profound. A cadet, a towering reptilian strategist, raised a clawed hand. You mean, reputation? Surely bans are about vulnerability, not perception. The instructor shook his head. No. It is not perception alone. It is the unpredictable integration of intelligence, resourcefulness, and improvisation. They are excluded not because they cannot fight, but because they cannot be fully anticipated. Humanity's unpredictability introduces variables that conventional command structures cannot manage without risk to themselves. The cadets stared, unease rippling through scales. The notion that a small, seemingly underdeveloped species could affect fleets and entire campaigns without engaging directly challenged everything they had been taught. A holographic sequence played, showing past conflicts where human indirect interventions had altered outcomes in subtle but decisive ways. Supply routes rerouted through gravitational anomalies before ambushes could occur. Diplomacy leveraged to shift entire planetary alliances mid-conflict. Advanced predictive algorithms that optimized logistics, sometimes turning near defeat into strategic advantage. The students watched in stunned silence. Humans had not fired a single weapon in these instances, yet the results were undeniable. Entire battles had been shaped by human decisions made far from the front lines. Notice, the instructor said, emphasizing each point, humans operate under constraints that force ingenuity. Their small fleets, their limited direct involvement, and their decentralized command systems create a natural environment for improvisation. The result is highly effective, yet unpredictable to those expecting conventional methods. Another cadet, an insectoid with translucent wings, whispered to their neighbor, so, they are banned because they are dangerous. The instructor's gaze swept across the hall. Not dangerous in the traditional sense. Dangerous in a strategic sense. Every major conflict we have studied contains countless assumptions about fleet behavior, force allocation, and opponent psychology. Humans challenge every assumption without ever appearing to engage directly. He paused, letting the weight of the statement sink in. Across the room, some students shifted uncomfortably. This was not the usual lecture of brute force and predictable outcomes. They were learning about an intelligence that reshaped how war was understood without ever firing a shot. The instructor tapped a control, and the projection shifted to show the human fleet in a series of maneuver exercises. Small ships moved in patterns that appeared chaotic at first glance, yet each movement served a tactical function. The students noted that humans rarely formed rigid formations, they relied on observation, improvisation, and redundancy. Humans are evaluated differently by every species they encounter, the instructor continued. They are excluded from combat not as punishment, but as precaution. Commanders of every major interstellar alliance recognize that including them in a direct conflict introduces unknowns they cannot risk. This is both a compliment and a warning. The reptilian cadet spoke again, voice low. So, they are respected. The instructor's expression remained neutral. Yes, in a sense. But it is a respect born of caution and recognition of competence. The galaxy's elite do not underestimate humans, they prepare for their influence, even in absence. The lecture then examined human strategy in multispecies conflicts. Case studies showed how human negotiators, fleet commanders, and scientists had influenced events by redirecting supply chains through unconventional routes, introducing microtechnologies that subtly optimized fleet efficiency, establishing communication protocols that could diffuse conflicts before escalation. The emphasis was clear: humans operated at the intersection of strategy, adaptability, and subtle influence. They were not omnipotent, but their presence required consideration at every level. Notice the scale of their impact, the instructor said. They have never engaged directly in galactic combat, yet the outcomes of numerous campaigns, both political and military, have been altered because of them. That is why humans are excluded from direct participation, not because they cannot fight, but because their unpredictability is strategically invaluable. By the end of the session, the students understood the lesson. Humans were a species that thrived on adaptation, improvisation, and calculated unpredictability. They had earned indirect influence in galactic conflicts, shaping outcomes from behind the lines, and had established a reputation that the galaxy's elite could neither ignore nor fully integrate into conventional battle plans. The instructor concluded. Humanity is excluded from direct combat because their inclusion would introduce variables that cannot be quantified, predicted, or controlled. That exclusion is a recognition of their ingenuity. It is a lesson every strategist must learn. Sometimes, the most formidable presence in war is the one that chooses not to fight conventionally. The cadets left the hall with a new understanding. Apex predators, energy intelligences, and crystalline strategists alike began to appreciate that humans were not merely survivors, they were intelligent operators whose influence extended far beyond their physical or numerical power. And as the students filed out, whispering and debating, the lesson resonated in the quiet of the academy. Humanity's exclusion from interstellar combat was itself a testament to their subtle, unparalleled capability. The humans were rarely seen in the theaters of conflict, yet their presence was always felt. Across the sectors, intelligence reports occasionally mentioned small fleets appearing where none were expected, supply chains rerouting in ways that suggested unseen coordination, and diplomatic messages altering the behavior of multiple species simultaneously. To the galaxy's elite, this pattern was confusing, even frustrating. How could a civilization so small in numbers and ostensibly new to interstellar politics exercise influence on such a scale? Lieutenant Hale's team aboard the Endeavour maneuvered through a contested corridor near the outer edge of the Sol system, carefully navigating microasteroid fields and unstable gravitational zones. Their mission was not one of confrontation. They were observers, analysts, and operators, gathering data that could alter entire strategic frameworks. Every decision was calculated for maximum effect, with minimal risk. Sensors probed the environment, mapping subspace anomalies and potential choke points that larger fleets could exploit or be trapped by. Alien observers in nearby patrols noticed the subtle efficiency of human operations. The Varkath, a species renowned for their dominance and instinctive aggression, adjusted their surveillance patterns. Instead of rushing to intercept, they mirrored human movements at a distance, analyzing timing, sensor modulation, and navigational precision. For the first time, they realized that the human's influence was not about firepower but adaptability. Every movement was a decision, and every decision altered the calculations of others. On board the human ship, Ensign Lee monitored fleet telemetry. Their pattern is consistent, but unpredictable, she said, tapping data points across the holographic interface. They're testing every assumption we make. Hale nodded. That's the point. Humans rarely force an outcome with raw strength. We adjust, anticipate, and leverage the environment. It's subtle, but it's effective. Observation and adaptation are our weapons. Across the galaxy, Academy cadets and junior strategists took note of these operations. Holographic feeds displayed human microfleets threading through contested zones, redirecting logistical nodes, and establishing communication protocols that subtly altered alliance behaviors. Some species dismissed the actions as coincidence or luck, but careful analysis revealed a pattern of intelligence-driven intervention. Humans were influencing the battlefield without ever firing a shot or deploying overwhelming force. At the edges of contested space, a minor Varkath cruiser observed a human fleet approaching a cluster of unstable energy anomalies. Normally, an aggressive fleet would attempt to dominate the field or avoid it entirely. The human fleet, however, adjusted with precision. Micromaneuvers corrected each vessel's trajectory in real time, subspace emissions were modulated to avoid detection, and small drones recalibrated gravitational sensors to optimize the fleet's path. The result was complete operational integrity without attracting attention. The Varkath analysts were baffled. They anticipate risk with methods we cannot predict, one hissed. Even when appearing vulnerable, they maintain control. Another countered, they are prey. They should be incapable of strategic influence at this scale. The lead analyst, older and more experienced, simply observed, realizing that the human strength lay not in confrontation but in their capacity to integrate intelligence, environment, and foresight into every action. Meanwhile, back in human command centers orbiting neutral worlds, teams coordinated not for battle, but for influence. Minor supply chains were rerouted to stabilize allies in contested systems. Diplomatic channels were subtly manipulated to delay escalation between species with volatile histories. Sensors detected subspace fluctuations and gravitational anomalies, allowing humans to adjust fleet paths and communications without revealing their presence. Every move was calculated to maximize effect while minimizing exposure. In academy classrooms across the galaxy, cadets debated these maneuvers with growing unease. Simulations had always taught them that victory depended on overwhelming force or superior numbers. Humans had shattered that assumption. By remaining small, decentralized, and adaptive, humans introduced variables that elite strategists could not fully anticipate. To include them in a conventional conflict would be risky. To exclude them would invite frustration, for their influence persisted regardless. Hale reviewed reports from field sensors. Notice how every small adjustment affects enemy calculations, he told Lee. A micromovement here, a sensor recalibration there, these are not mistakes. They are signals, influencing how others respond. Lee nodded, awe in her voice. It's like they're shaping the battlefield without engaging. Hale smiled faintly. Exactly. Humans don't need to fight to win attention. We need to be smart enough that others must account for us. The lesson was clear in real-time operations. Human fleets often appeared in contested systems just long enough to provide intelligence, adjust logistics, or send signals to allies. Then they vanished, leaving the impression of omnipresence but without engagement. The galaxy's elite, who relied on predictability, could not fully account for these interventions. Each instance reinforced the notion that humans were effective not because of their strength, but because of their ingenuity and adaptability. As another simulation played across the Academy's holoscreens, students observed a scenario where humans diverted a fleet's path using microgravitational anomalies, forcing an enemy coalition to adjust their strategy mid-operation. The cadets whispered among themselves. They didn't fight, yet they controlled the flow of the battle, one said. Another muttered, this is dangerous intelligence. Back in the field, Hale's fleet continued its indirect interventions, maintaining a careful balance between influence and invisibility. He communicated with allied representatives, offering guidance and strategic suggestions without ever ordering direct action. Each suggestion altered the probability of success in subtle ways, demonstrating the human capacity for coordinated problem-solving and strategic foresight on a galactic scale. By the end of the operation, alien observers were left unsettled. Humans had reshaped assumptions about risk, adaptability, and operational control without participating in conventional combat. They had proven that exclusion from direct warfare was not a limitation, it was a recognition of their strategic unpredictability and subtle power. Hale reviewed the data one last time. Every species we've encountered, he said quietly to Lee, has underestimated us at some point. And every time, we've leveraged that. Being excluded isn't weakness, it's a chance to demonstrate ingenuity where others cannot interfere. Lee smiled. So the legend is true. Humans are dangerous even when they're not fighting. Hale's gaze swept across the stars, distant and silent witnesses to a human fleet whose influence was measured not in shots fired, but in calculated adjustments, intelligence coordination, and the subtle reshaping of interstellar events. Humanity had turned absence into strategy, demonstrating that the most formidable weapon was the mind itself, and the galaxy's elite were learning that lesson firsthand. The simulation room in the Academy of Strategic Command was silent, except for the soft hum of holographic projectors and the clicking of claws and limbs across control panels. Alien cadets crowded around floating displays showing sequences of human fleet maneuvers in contested systems. They had seen fragments before, but today the instructor was guiding them through the full scope of the operations. Observe the micro-adjustments, the instructor said, gesturing to a stream of data. Humans are excluded from direct combat. Yet notice the outcomes of these operations. They affect entire systems without firing a single shot. The students leaned closer, cranial ridges flickering in excitement or confusion, depending on species. Apex predator cadets, who had once scoffed at humanity's size and fleet composition, now studied the data with intense scrutiny. Each simulation showed human fleets operating with precision, foresight, and situational awareness far beyond what conventional theory would predict. "They are manipulating probabilities," whispered a crystalline strategist. "Without engagement, they are shaping entire campaigns." The instructor nodded. "Exactly. Consider what would happen if humans were included in conventional combat. Their ingenuity introduces unpredictable variables that could compromise even the most calculated plans. That is why they are banned. Not because they lack skill, but because their skill is unquantifiable in standard models." One cadet, a tall, thin species with translucent skin and multiple sensory nodes, spoke up. "So their exclusion is protective? For us, for themselves?" The instructor allowed a faint smile. "For everyone. The galaxy's elite recognize that involving humans directly in war creates too many unknowns. Their indirect influence, however, is controlled, strategic, and immensely effective." The display shifted to a simulation of a supply corridor in a disputed sector. Human engineers had rerouted critical energy shipments in subtle ways. To the untrained observer, it looked like coincidence or logistical error. But closer analysis revealed a pattern. By diverting supply flow, the humans had altered enemy fleet movements, delayed reinforcements, and prevented escalation of a skirmish into a major engagement. A young predator cadet hissed in frustration. "They've changed the battle outcome without fighting. How is that even possible?" "That is exactly the point," the instructor said. "Humans operate under constraints that force ingenuity. Their actions cannot be predicted by standard tactical models. They have become masters of indirect influence." The lesson continued with historical case studies. In one scenario, humans had provided encrypted guidance to Allied fleets, allowing them to navigate a dense asteroid field without detection. An enemy fleet, expecting conventional maneuvers, had entered the field blindly, losing cohesion and initiative. Human participation had been entirely invisible. There was no heroics, no overwhelming firepower, no spectacular show of force. Yet the strategic outcome was decisively in favor of humanity's allies. Students murmured among themselves. "They operate like chess players," said one insectoid cadet. "Every move anticipates not just the next turn, but the opponent's response to the next turn, and the next after that." "More than chess," the instructor corrected. "Humans account for the environment itself as a variable. Gravity wells, anomalies, political tension, even the psychological tendencies of other species. Their strategy is holistic. It integrates every factor, making their exclusion from direct conflict a protective measure for predictability, not a limitation of capability." Alien students now faced a sobering realization. While they had been trained to measure opponents by firepower, fleet size, and tactical aggression, humans introduced an entirely different category of strategic influence. Inclusion in combat could destabilize not just a single battle but entire campaigns. Their unpredictability forced other species to reconsider every assumption about risk, outcome, and planning. A crystalline strategist whispered, "They're dangerous. Not because they are strong, but because they operate outside our models. Our simulations can't account for them." The instructor nodded gravely. "This is the core lesson. Humans are banned from interstellar combat not because of weakness. They are banned because including them would require adapting models that no fleet commander can fully trust. The galaxy's elite acknowledge this, and that acknowledgement is a form of respect, cautious, deliberate, and deeply earned." To illustrate, the simulation shifted to a diplomatic scenario. Human negotiators had intervened in a system where multiple species were on the brink of war over disputed resources. Using a combination of logistical advice, subtle intelligence sharing, and communication protocols, they managed to de-escalate tensions without deploying a single vessel into a combat role. The resulting resolution prevented potential casualties and maintained balance across multiple sectors. A predator cadet hissed, "So humans aren't just tacticians, they influence diplomacy, logistics, and psychology." All without direct engagement. Correct, the instructor confirmed. Their influence is multidimensional. Warfare is not just about destruction, it is about control, prediction, and adaptation. Humans excel in all three precisely because their absence forces them to find unconventional solutions. The students watched as the simulation ended, revealing statistical outcomes. Conflicts that might have escalated into full-scale wars were subtly prevented or redirected by human interventions. Every sector touched by their operations showed evidence of efficiency, adaptability, and foresight. You see why they are excluded? The instructor asked. Direct involvement introduces variables too volatile to control. Exclusion ensures that their ingenuity remains an indirect force, shaping the galaxy quietly but effectively. The cadets absorbed the lesson. Respect for humans was no longer theoretical, it was data-driven, observable, and undeniable. Apex predators, energy intelligences, and crystalline strategists alike began to understand that exclusion did not equate to weakness, it represented a strategic choice by the galaxy's elite. Hale's operations continued unseen in the background of these lessons. His fleet maintained vigilance, deploying microfleets, coordinating logistical reroutes, and monitoring environmental anomalies. Each action, measured and deliberate, had ripple effects that would be studied in academy classrooms across the galaxy for decades. Ensign Lee reviewed fleet telemetry. We're invisible, yet every action changes the battlefield. Every calculation, every minor adjustment, it's all teaching them indirectly. Hale's expression was thoughtful. Exactly. The galaxy is learning, even if they don't realize it. Our absence is our strategy. Our ingenuity is our presence. That's why the ban exists, and why it matters. The instructor concluded the session, leaving the cadets with one final, sobering statement: humanity's exclusion from direct combat is not a limitation. It is a lesson in strategy, adaptability, and influence. Remember this when you plan operations, whether you face humans or study them from afar. Sometimes, the most formidable force is the one that chooses not to fight conventionally, yet shapes outcomes decisively. As the students filed out, whispers of awe and disbelief filled the corridors. Apex predators, scholars, and strategists alike understood that humans were not just another species in the galaxy. They were a civilization that had mastered indirect influence, reshaping the behavior of allies, enemies, and entire sectors without ever stepping onto a conventional battlefield. The galaxy's elite had learned, in these simulations, the first critical truth about humanity: exclusion from combat did not equal impotence, it amplified their ingenuity and influence, creating a force that was subtle, precise, and profoundly effective. And so, the lesson of human strategy continued to echo through the halls of the academy, leaving cadets with an uneasy, respectful acknowledgement. When it came to the galaxy's most unpredictable variable, one could never fully anticipate humanity. The Endeavour glided through the outer rim, its sensors scanning a sector known for repeated skirmishes between two rival species. The corridor was narrow, a tangle of asteroid fields, micro-wormholes, and gravitational anomalies. To an outsider, it appeared as though a small, underpowered human fleet was threading a needle, yet every move was deliberate, every sensor ping calculated. Lieutenant Marcus Hale studied the holographic display, noting fleet positions, enemy patrol patterns, and subspace fluctuations. "This is our test," he said to Ensign Lee, who stood nearby monitoring real-time telemetry. "We will influence the outcome, prevent escalation, and maintain secrecy. No engagement unless unavoidable. Observation and adaptation are our weapons here." Lee's fingers danced across the console. "The rival fleets are both predictable and impulsive," she said. "We can anticipate their movement if we manipulate the environment carefully. Just enough to create hesitation without alerting them to our presence." Hale nodded. "Exactly. We're invisible architects of the battlefield. They don't even know we exist, but every decision we make will ripple across their operations." A holographic overlay showed the enemy fleets entering a dense cluster of unstable asteroids. Traditional command theory would suggest a direct patrol or aggressive interception. Humans did neither. Instead, they deployed a series of microdrones capable of gravitational microadjustments. These drones subtly shifted asteroid positions, altering the safest paths for the rival fleets without triggering alarms. The result was instantaneous. Enemy ships hesitated, recalculating trajectories, and delaying their engagement schedules. Minor delays compounded, creating a ripple effect that human intelligence could track and optimize. "Notice the hesitation?" Hale said, pointing to the readouts. "They don't realize it's external. But every recalculation increases our control over timing and positioning. This is influence without confrontation. Lee watched in awe. It's elegant. Minimal risk, maximum impact. Back at the academy, cadets studying archived simulations marveled at the ingenuity. Crystalline strategists traced fleet adjustments with shimmering appendages, while apex predator students hissed and clawed at displays, frustrated at how humans manipulated forces without firing a weapon. They control outcomes they aren't even directly engaging, one predator muttered. This defies everything we've been trained to value in warfare. The instructor responded calmly. It defies outdated models. Humans excel because they must operate within constraints. Small fleets, limited direct firepower, and decentralized command force them to innovate. Their ingenuity becomes a strategic multiplier. In the field, the humans continued. A rival patrol began a scanning sweep that might have detected minor disturbances. Hale adjusted fleet emission frequencies, modulating energy signatures to mask drone activity. The enemy recalculated, assuming anomalies were natural. Every adjustment had to be precise. One misstep could reveal human presence, but flawless execution meant maximum influence with no risk. Lee's voice was tense. We're threading the line between observation and intervention. One wrong frequency and she trailed off, letting the implication hang. Detection could spark escalation, compromise allies, or force direct engagement, something the humans explicitly avoided. Hale's expression was steady. That's why this is strategy, not combat. We calculate, anticipate, and nudge events. Invisible hands, not visible firepower. The first test of human ingenuity came when a microwormhole formed along a likely enemy route, threatening fleet cohesion. Standard fleets would either halt, risking exposure, or force a bypass, leaving tactical gaps. Hale's fleet, using predictive algorithms and autonomous drones, adjusted fleet paths in real time. The recalibration was imperceptible but exact. Rival ships diverted subtly, unaware they were being guided. The ripple effect continued. By the time the enemy realized the anomaly existed, human influence had reshaped patrol schedules, delay windows, and resource allocation. Entire campaigns were subtly optimized without a single laser fired, no shields tested, no hull breached. Back at the academy, cadets studied this exact scenario. Apex predators groaned audibly. So humans can alter the course of a conflict without ever being seen, one hissed. Yes, the instructor replied. And that is precisely why humans are banned from direct combat. They introduce variables we cannot predict or control. Their indirect operations are safer and more effective, yet far more disruptive to conventional planning. The crystalline strategist spoke up. It's not brute strength or numbers, they're changing the probability landscape itself. The instructor nodded. Correct. Humans operate on a level of systemic influence. That is what we call strategic ingenuity. And it is precisely why the galaxy's elite treat their absence as both cautionary and respectful. They shape outcomes in ways conventional fleets cannot replicate. The humans' next maneuver was subtler still. A minor supply convoy for one faction was approaching the contested corridor. Hale's fleet adjusted its energy signature patterns and communication interference just enough to subtly reroute the convoy through safer paths. By doing so, they prevented accidental skirmishes and ensured that both sides maintained operational integrity, all while maintaining anonymity. Lee observed the feedback loop. Every adjustment we make cascades through multiple systems. We're influencing both sides without ever engaging. And they never see us. Exactly, Hale said. Indirect impact is often more effective than direct engagement. Our small fleet is irrelevant in brute force terms, but in strategic terms, it can change outcomes at multiple levels. By the end of the operation, the rival fleets had unknowingly avoided potential disaster, and the human intervention left no detectable trace. The Endeavour and its microfleets withdrew quietly, leaving the enemy to continue as if guided by chance. In the Academy's lecture halls, cadets marveled at the orchestration. The instructor concluded, humans are excluded from direct combat because inclusion would introduce too many unquantifiable variables. That is both a measure of their ingenuity and a warning to those who underestimate them. They are capable not of destruction, but of strategic influence, subtle, precise, and profoundly effective. Students left the session in awe. Apex predators, energy intelligences, and crystalline strategists alike realized that humans' absence from the battlefield was itself a force multiplier. By remaining unseen, they could achieve what conventional fleets often could not: control outcomes without confrontation, adjust the probability of success without engagement, and subtly reshape the operational landscape across entire sectors. Hale watched the stars recede as the fleet left the contested zone. Each human decision, each subtle adjustment, reinforced a principle that would echo across the galaxy: strategic ingenuity, not firepower, defined humanity's true influence, and their exclusion from combat amplified that impact. Across the galaxy, the ripple effects of humanity's indirect operations were beginning to register in unexpected ways. In the council chambers of multiple interstellar alliances, the reports arrived slowly but insistently. Systems that had seemed on the brink of chaos were stabilizing, supply routes in contested sectors were recalibrating without visible interference, and conflicts that might have escalated into full-scale war were resolving through subtle adjustments. Representatives of apex predator species, crystalline strategists, and energy intelligences pored over the data, puzzled. Each case bore the unmistakable hallmark of human influence: precision, adaptability, and an almost imperceptible orchestration of outcomes. The paradox was clear: the humans were not involved in direct combat, yet they were shaping the battlefield in ways that elite fleets and commanders could not anticipate. The debate in the council chambers grew heated. "They are banned from combat," one predator delegate hissed, claws tapping impatiently on the council table. "How can a species we exclude wield such influence? It defies the logic of engagement." A crystalline strategist replied, voice echoing across the chamber, "Logic is based on predictable variables. Humans are not predictable. Their actions operate outside conventional metrics. They do not fight conventionally, yet they alter probabilities in ways we cannot fully model." An energy intelligence, shimmering with faint currents of light, added, "It is not fear we feel. It is cautious respect. Their absence is a choice, yet it maximizes influence. Including them directly could destabilize entire campaigns." Back in the field, Lieutenant Hale and the crew of the Endeavour continued their quiet work. In one disputed corridor, a small skirmish between rival factions was approaching potential escalation. Hale analyzed the sensor data and realized that conventional intervention would draw attention. Instead, he instructed his team to deploy subtle navigational interferences, redirecting the skirmish so that both sides avoided contact and maintained operational security. Ensign Lee observed the results in real time. "It's working. They're adjusting as expected, without realizing it's us." Hale nodded. "This is exactly the type of operation humans excel at. Minimal visibility, maximal impact. It's the strategic leverage of absence." Across the academy, cadets studied this exact scenario, analyzing how human ingenuity created outcomes that conventional fleets could not achieve. Apex predator students huffed in frustration. "If they were included directly," one growled, "they would outmaneuver us every time." The instructor, unflinching, replied, "They are included indirectly. That is the brilliance of it. Their absence does not weaken them, it amplifies the consequences of their intelligence and strategy." In the council chambers, policy discussions began to reflect this growing understanding. Some delegates argued that humans should be allowed direct participation in interstellar combat, citing their effectiveness in shaping outcomes. Others countered that such inclusion would create unmanageable variables, introducing risks no fleet could predict. A senior strategist from a dominant galactic species summarized the tension succinctly: "Humanity's exclusion is both their greatest limitation and their most potent advantage. We respect them because we cannot control them, yet we are compelled to study them because they influence events regardless of visibility. To include them directly is to gamble with the unknown." The debate mirrored the lessons being taught in the academy. Humans were formidable not because of numbers, firepower, or alien technology, but because their approach integrated intelligence, adaptability, and environmental manipulation into strategy itself. Meanwhile, the Endeavour executed a coordinated operation across multiple sectors. Human microfleets, unarmed in conventional terms, adjusted supply chains, rerouted patrols, and optimized communications for allies. Each action was measured, subtle, and designed to avoid detection. Yet the outcome was unmistakable: rival factions found themselves delayed, misaligned, and subtly influenced in ways that would be impossible to trace. Hale reviewed the post-operation analysis. "Notice the pattern," he said to Lee. "We create leverage without confrontation. Every adjustment teaches a lesson in resourcefulness and adaptation. The galaxy perceives us indirectly, yet we shape outcomes precisely." Lee's eyes widened. "It's as if they fear our presence, yet they don't even know it's there." "Exactly," Hale replied. "Strategic influence is not about being seen. It's about being effective. That's why the ban exists. It's not punishment. It's recognition. At the academy, cadets discuss the implications. Humans operate outside the rules we understand, one energy intelligence cadet murmured. They are excluded from combat, yet their indirect influence is undeniable. How do we even prepare for that? A predator cadet hissed. We prepare by acknowledging them as a variable we cannot control. Every fleet, every campaign must account for human ingenuity. They are not conventional enemies, they are a force multiplier whose absence is as impactful as direct engagement. The instructor, watching the students debate, allowed a small nod of approval. Exactly. The lesson here is subtle, but profound. Strategic brilliance does not require direct engagement. Sometimes, absence, ingenuity, and the ability to shape events invisibly are the most potent tools available to any species. Back in the field, human operations continued. Sensors tracked minor gravitational anomalies, micro-wormhole fluctuations, and energy pulse patterns. Each adjustment influenced enemy fleet calculations, delayed patrols, and optimized supply flows for allies. The operation required constant analysis, precision, and adaptability, but it was executed flawlessly. Hale observed the results on his display. We are invisible, yet we are shaping the battlefield. Every minor action cascades through the operational framework, creating outcomes that appear coincidental but are fully calculated. Lee's voice carried a mix of awe and respect. It's the ultimate lesson in influence. The galaxy reacts to humans even when they don't engage. And they have no idea why. Precisely, Hale said. That is the power of indirect strategy. That is why humans are banned from direct combat. Their unpredictability, adaptability, and ingenuity create consequences that cannot be modeled, and yet they are profoundly effective. In council chambers, alien delegates began to shift their thinking. Policies were drafted to account for human indirect influence. Fleet deployment algorithms incorporated variables for unseen actors. Strategic doctrines emphasized adaptability over brute force, mirroring lessons gleaned from human operations. Even species with centuries of military dominance began to acknowledge a subtle truth. Human ingenuity reshaped the galaxy without ever engaging directly, and that reshaping demanded respect, caution, and recalibrated strategy. The lesson for cadets, commanders, and politicians alike was clear. Humans were not a threat in the conventional sense, but their indirect influence altered probability, reshaped strategy, and forced every species to reassess the rules of engagement. Exclusion from combat was not a limitation. It was a force multiplier, amplifying human ingenuity and leaving a galaxy of observers both impressed and unsettled. By the end of these operations, the Endeavour and its human microfleets had left the contested sectors with no trace of presence. The rival fleets resumed normal operations, unaware of the invisible influence that had stabilized their actions, optimized their paths, and prevented unnecessary conflict. Hale reviewed the final data. Every outcome was shaped without engagement. Every decision, every adjustment, rippled through multiple systems. The galaxy's elite are learning, even if they don't fully realize it. Lee nodded. It's subtle, but it's undeniable. Humans are excluded from combat, yet they are everywhere. Their influence is invisible, precise, and unavoidable. Hale gazed at the distant stars. That is the lesson the galaxy must learn. Ingenuity, adaptability, and strategic subtlety can be far more impactful than direct force. Humanity's absence from the battlefield is not weakness, it is the most effective strategy we have. The galaxy, watching from afar, began to understand a profound truth. Humans were shaping outcomes they would never appear in, altering campaigns, strategies, and alliances with subtlety and intelligence. Their exclusion was not a limit, but a testament to their strategic mastery. In the upper chambers of the Interstellar Strategic Council, the debate over humanity had reached a turning point. Delegates from multiple alliances, apex predator species, crystalline strategists, and energy intelligences gathered around a massive holoprojection of contested sectors, supply routes, and fleet movements. The projections were dotted with subtle anomalies, routes that shifted inexplicably, patrols delayed for unknown reasons, and skirmishes that never escalated. A predator delegate slammed a clawed fist against the council table. We cannot ignore it any longer. Human influence is evident across every contested sector. They are banned from combat, yet they reshape the battlefield with the subtlety of a ghost. How is that acceptable? A crystalline strategist replied, their voice resonating with calm authority. It is not a question of acceptability. It is a recognition of efficiency. Humans operate indirectly because their inclusion would destabilize entire campaigns. Their absence is deliberate, and it maximizes their effectiveness while minimizing risk to themselves and others. The energy intelligence delegate pulsed lightly in agreement. It is a paradox. Exclusion amplifies their strategic impact. Every fleet commander, every diplomat, and every analyst must account for their presence without ever seeing them. Their influence is systemic. In orbit over a neutral sector, the human fleet continued operations quietly. Lieutenant Marcus Hale monitored microfleets dispersed across multiple star systems. Each fleet maintained stealth, manipulating logistical nodes, subtly influencing enemy patrols, and optimizing ally routes, all without engaging directly. Ensign Lee watched the display. Every adjustment we make cascades through multiple systems. We never need to fire a shot to achieve objectives, yet the outcome is decisive. Hale nodded. That's the power of indirect influence. Strategy does not require confrontation, it requires anticipation, adaptability, and subtle orchestration. Humans excel at that precisely because we operate under constraints. Back in the Council, a senior strategist compiled data from dozens of sectors. The humans' operations are invisible, yet every campaign they touch shows measurable improvement in efficiency, reduction of casualties, and stabilization of contested zones. Even elite fleets struggle to account for this without direct observation. Another delegate, a Predator admiral, hissed in frustration. And yet, they are banned from participating directly in combat. It seems illogical. Why prevent such capability when it could be used for the benefit of alliances? Because their inclusion is unpredictable, the strategist replied. Direct engagement introduces variables that no simulation can fully model. Exclusion preserves operational stability while allowing humans to influence outcomes subtly. It is both a safeguard and a strategic tool. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humans were not conventional combatants, they were invisible strategists, shaping entire sectors without detection, and their exclusion amplified the impact of their ingenuity. Hale's fleet entered a particularly delicate corridor, where rival factions were poised for engagement. The corridor was dense with gravitational anomalies and asteroid clusters, a perfect natural choke point. Using predictive modeling, the human command calculated minor adjustments in fleet positioning and sensor emissions. The rival fleets, unaware of the invisible hand guiding them, hesitated and recalibrated their trajectories. Lee tapped her console. They're responding exactly as anticipated. Every hesitation and realignment increases our control over timing and flow without revealing us. Hale's gaze remained steady. This is the lesson: humans influence outcomes without engagement. Indirect actions, precisely executed, produce results that direct force often cannot. This is why the ban exists. It is recognition of both our capability and our unpredictability. In council simulations, cadets and junior strategists dissected these operations with growing concern. Apex predators muttered in frustration as they tracked invisible fleet movements and supply chain adjustments. Crystalline strategists analyzed the ripple effects across multiple star systems, realizing that humans had reshaped outcomes without a single engagement. They operate outside the parameters of our models, a young strategist noted. Every time we think we understand, they adjust variables we cannot predict. The instructor, observing, allowed a small nod. The lesson is simple yet profound. Humans are effective not because of power or aggression, but because of ingenuity, adaptability, and strategic subtlety. Their absence does not limit them, it amplifies their influence. Hale and Lee coordinated the final stage of the operation. Microdrones subtly adjusted gravitational microfields along enemy paths, diverting patrols, delaying reinforcements, and preventing potential skirmishes from escalating. Supply convoys for allies moved through optimal routes, avoiding hazards and maintaining operational integrity. Every human action was invisible to the enemy, yet it reshaped outcomes across multiple systems. By the time rival fleets realized the anomalies, the humans were already gone, leaving no trace. Lee exhaled. Every mission, every adjustment, every calculation, it's like we're rewriting the battlefield without being seen. Hale's expression was thoughtful. That is the point. Humans are excluded from combat not to weaken us, but to highlight our ingenuity. Every ripple we create carries lessons for allies and adversaries alike. This is strategic mastery in its purest form. Back in council chambers, the discussion shifted from debate to policy. Delegates proposed integrating human-style indirect influence into fleet doctrines. Training programs emphasized adaptability, predictive modeling, and environmental manipulation, drawing inspiration from human operations. Even apex predators, traditionally reliant on aggression and overwhelming force, began to recognize that strategy was about subtlety as much as strength. The lead strategist summarized, "Human exclusion is a lesson in itself. It demonstrates that a species' greatest strength may lie in its ingenuity, in the ability to operate unseen yet decisively. Humanity is not just a participant in the galaxy, they are a benchmark for strategic subtlety." Hale's fleet completed its operation and withdrew from the corridor, leaving rival factions none the wiser. Every adjustment, every invisible intervention, had achieved measurable impact without confrontation. Across multiple sectors, conflicts were stabilized, casualties reduced, and alliances subtly reinforced. Lee reflected aloud. "We're everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And yet, everything we touch changes the outcome." Hale nodded. "That is the lesson for the galaxy. Humans influence not by power, but by foresight, adaptability, and precision. That is why we are excluded from direct combat, and why the galaxy cannot ignore us." By the end of the council session, the recognition was clear. Humans were not merely another species, they were a force of strategic ingenuity, reshaping galactic outcomes through subtle, invisible influence. Their exclusion from direct combat was both a testament to their capability and a safeguard for stability across the galaxy. For cadets, commanders, and policymakers alike, the lesson was unmistakable: humanity's absence was a force multiplier, their ingenuity unquantifiable, and their influence unavoidable. The galaxy had learned, with growing respect and cautious vigilance, that humans were not to be underestimated. Precisely because they often operated unseen, the Interstellar Strategic Council convened once more, this time with a unified purpose: to review the cumulative effects of humanity's indirect influence across contested sectors. Holographic projections flickered above the council table, showing a tapestry of human operations, supply reroutes, fleet microadjustments, and subtle navigational interferences. Each action had prevented escalation, stabilized disputed systems, or improved allied operational efficiency, yet all had been executed without a single direct engagement. A Predator delegate, claws tapping rhythmically, leaned forward. "We have witnessed it repeatedly. Human fleets are excluded from direct combat, yet their presence is felt everywhere. Entire campaigns are subtly reshaped without their being seen. It is extraordinary." A crystalline strategist, shimmering with internal resonance, responded. "It is not extraordinary, it is logical. Their absence forces ingenuity. Their operations are indirect by design, yet they achieve results that direct engagement often cannot. Humanity has redefined strategic influence." An energy intelligence delegate pulsed lightly. "It is clear now. Exclusion does not limit them, it amplifies them. We have been witnessing a form of tactical mastery beyond conventional comprehension." Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim, Lieutenant Marcus Hale and the crew of the Endeavour coordinated their final operational adjustments across multiple sectors. Microfleets maneuvered through asteroid belts and gravitational anomalies, subtly influencing enemy fleet movements, optimizing supply chains for allies, and preventing potential skirmishes. The human presence was invisible to all observers, yet the outcomes were unmistakable. Ensign Lee studied the final telemetry. "Every ripple we've created has compounded. Entire campaigns have been stabilized, conflicts avoided, and operational efficiency improved, all without a single shot fired." Hale's gaze was steady, thoughtful. "That is the essence of human influence. Strategy is not measured in firepower alone, it is measured in outcomes, adaptability, and the ability to shape events invisibly. That is why we are excluded. Our absence is part of the plan. Our influence is deliberate." Across the galaxy, military academies and strategy councils began incorporating lessons learned from human operations. Simulations now included variables for invisible actors, probabilistic adjustments, and indirect influence. Training emphasized adaptability, foresight, and the subtle manipulation of outcomes rather than brute force. Apex predators grudgingly acknowledged that human-style indirect strategy was a force to be reckoned with, and even elite fleets began to recalibrate doctrines to account for unseen human influence. A young Predator cadet whispered to a classmate, "We always thought strength was about size, numbers, and aggression. But humans, they prove it's about adaptability, anticipation, and subtle influence." The classmate nodded slowly. "And we are only seeing what they allow us to see. Their full capability is unknowable." Back in the field, the Endeavour completed its final set of adjustments in a contested corridor. Minor gravitational shifts delayed enemy patrols, supply convoys were rerouted safely, and potential conflicts were averted. All fleets resumed operations as though no intervention had occurred, yet the stabilized systems reflected humanity's precise guidance. Hale observed the results with a quiet satisfaction. Every mission reinforces the lesson: humans shape the galaxy not through brute force, but through ingenuity. Our absence is our strategy, our influence our weapon. That is why the ban exists, and why the galaxy will continue to learn from us. Lee's voice carried a mix of awe and respect. It's subtle, yet profound. Every ripple we create is felt across multiple systems, and yet they cannot trace it back to us. We are everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Exactly, Hale said. This is the long game. Indirect influence is more effective than direct engagement. It stabilizes sectors, teaches lessons to allies and adversaries alike, and demonstrates that strategy is about adaptation and foresight, not just combat. In the Council, delegates debated the long-term policy implications. The consensus was growing: humanity's exclusion from combat was not a punishment, but a strategic safeguard for the galaxy as a whole. Including humans in direct combat would introduce unpredictability no fleet could model. Excluding them allowed their ingenuity to operate with maximum effect and minimal risk. A senior Predator admiral concluded, claws folded deliberately, humanity's influence is undeniable. We cannot include them without destabilizing the entire theater, yet we cannot ignore them. Their absence has proven to be their most powerful asset. A crystalline strategist added, we have learned to respect them, cautiously and deliberately. They are a benchmark for strategic subtlety and indirect influence. Our future doctrines must account for their presence, even if unseen. Even energy intelligences, traditionally detached observers, acknowledged the reality. Humans had rewritten the rules of engagement without firing a single shot, proving that true power lies in foresight, adaptability, and subtle orchestration. Back aboard the Endeavour, Hale reflected on the broader implications of their operations. Humanity had proven, through constraint and ingenuity, that influence did not require visibility. By operating outside conventional models, they had reshaped the galaxy's understanding of strategy, engagement, and consequence. Entire fleets, councils, and academies now studied human operations as a standard for indirect influence and systemic foresight. Lee glanced at the starfield ahead. We're changing the galaxy without anyone knowing. That's incredible. And a little humbling. Hale nodded. Humility is part of strategy. We act precisely, without arrogance, because effectiveness is not measured in spectacle, but in outcomes. The galaxy may never fully understand us, but it will continue to feel our influence. In training academies across multiple species, cadets studied case after case of human intervention, supply chain reroutes, fleet microadjustments, environmental manipulations, and psychological influence. Apex predators who had once scoffed at humanity now acknowledged a subtle truth: strength was not merely physical power, but the ability to anticipate, adapt, and shape outcomes without detection. A predator cadet muttered, "We may never fight them directly, but we will always need to account for them." A crystalline strategist agreed. And in that, there is respect. Cautious, deliberate, and warranted respect. Humanity has redefined the meaning of strategic mastery. Hale looked out the viewport of the Endeavour, the stars stretching infinitely ahead. The galaxy was vast, contested, and unpredictable. Yet humanity's operations had proven a constant. Through ingenuity, subtlety, and indirect influence, they could stabilize, guide, and shape outcomes without ever stepping onto a conventional battlefield. Their exclusion from combat was not a limitation, it was a testament to their skill, adaptability, and strategic foresight. In the silence of the fleet, Hale spoke quietly, as though to the universe itself, "We do not need to fight directly to be heard. Our presence is measured in the ripples we leave behind. And those ripples will be felt long after fleets and empires have passed into history." The galaxy, observing from afar, finally understood a truth that had long been unquantifiable. Humans were invisible strategists, shaping wars, stabilizing systems, and earning respect, not through firepower, but through ingenuity. Their absence was their strength, and their influence would echo across the stars for generations to come.